Hello, are you dealing with the whys of suicide? Losing someone that you love to someone to whom you are very close to suicide is the most devastating loss of all. Nothing in your life has prepared you for it. No one is ever ready for it. Following a suicide, those that are left behind also spend a great deal of time wondering if there were signs that they missed or ways they could have prevented it from happening. Lost survivors inevitably search for a reason. Perhaps because having a reason might restore some small sense of control in a seemingly unpredictable world. Trying to understand why can occupy our minds for a long time, and ultimately, many realize they may never know. So if you're joining us today, either live or in the replay, we are going to be talking about dealing with the whys of suicide. Why did this happen? Why didn't I know? Why didn't somebody do something? Why do I feel like I'm going crazy? And why can't I get over this? So when we come back, we're going to be talking to Laurie Freeman to my side, who is the owner of Healing Heart Center Colorado, and she's a grief recovery specialist herself. So let's check out this short video, and then when we get back, we're going to talk about the whys. Welcome back. Suicide is not something. It's a club no one wants to be a part of. In fact, if you watched some of Laurie's past videos, she is a suicide survivor herself as well. So, Laurie, why don't you go ahead, for anybody that doesn't know you, go ahead and introduce yourself, what you do for a living, and why you're so passionate about it.
Hi, I'm Laurie Freeman, and I am the owner of the Healing Heart Center in Littleton, and I'm a certified grief recovery specialist in the grief recovery method. And having lost two of my family members to suicide and my daughter to an overdose, I understand grief, and I've worked this method and have gotten through to being able to live a life that's happy and fulfilled with gratitude and love.
I love that. So you're a suicide survivor yourself, and you've been through this, and you did the grief recovery method yourself, and we're at this point where we want to share with people. Well, what we know, suicide is a different type of loss. So whether it's a loss by, whatever other kind of death, suicide often comes with some other emotions that just typical or normal loss doesn't have. Not that suicide is abnormal, but suicide just has a different set of parameters that people are dealing with at home. And today, we're going to talk about some of the most popular questions that people are really struggling with at home, and we're going to knock these out one by one. But if you're just joining us live or you're hopping by in the replay and you've been through this and you've worked through this, we'd love to hear from you. Encourage someone else that's in the middle of it now to kind of work their way through it and maybe get the support and the help that they need. So let's talk about today's first question, Laurie. Dealing with the whys of suicide, why did this happen? So people are going to be thinking, why did this happen? They're really struggling around why did this happen? What kind of advice do you give to somebody that's really dealing with that?
The why it happened, a lot of times you'll never know the reason why. People tend to hide things. They could be hiding that they're depressed, that they're full of anxiety, that they feel hopeless, and that life is not worth living. You ultimately are not going to really understand the emotions that the person was feeling when they decided to end their lives by suicide.
Yeah, and this isn't abnormal. There are sometimes in some scenarios there are signs, and sometimes there are no signs at all. We've heard many people say, I had no clue this was coming. Why didn't they tell me? More whys we're going to talk about today. But ultimately, don't shoulder that. There are things that you'll never know. There are scenarios that you can never go back and really, really say, in that moment I should have done that. It's a lot more complicated than that.
It is.
So let's talk about the second one. So why didn't I know? So if you're out there dealing with the loss of suicide of someone in your life and you're saying to yourself, why didn't I know? We want you to know you're not alone either. And there could be some shame and some guilt and some things wrapped up in that. But what would you say to somebody who says, why didn't I know?
Well, there are risk factors and warning signs, but not all people show those signs. Some of the risk factors and warning signs are, doing reckless behavior, doing drugs, alcohol, giving away all their possessions. And a lot of times people will do a risk factor to one person and then a warning sign to another person. And you just don't know that that person is suicidal. And a lot of times, in my experience, I didn't know it was coming, and it takes you by surprise. But and there is no one reason that someone dies by suicide. It could be mental health issues. It could be stressors with work, especially during this pandemic time. The loss of a normal pattern of behavior can wear on someone that could cause them to think that suicide is the answer, and it's not.
And it's clearly not. And
Clearly
the one
not.
thing that we hear, there's that documentary with Kevin Hines, the only man that survived jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge. And what I
Yes.
remember hearing about his story is it was when his foot finally left the bridge is when he thought, I don't want to do this.
Right.
I don't want to do this. I just want the pain to end. And ultimately, suicide and mental health is stigmatized. Some people are embarrassed if they don't feel right. Some people won't share that they don't feel right because in our culture, it's not always popular. It's a sign of weakness, especially for men,
Right.
to say that they aren't feeling right. So if you're out there and you're struggling with the why I didn't know that it's not yours to carry for life.
Correct.
You may never know. And you got to kind of come to terms with that, right?
Correct. You have to.
So when you're working in the grief recovery method, in what step are we really working through that type of question?
We are working through part of the myths of grief that, you can't know everything that someone else is doing. And, carrying that with you is do the myth of I'm going to try to be strong and I'm, those kind of things just don't help you because you need to be able to acknowledge that your loved one died by suicide. There is the stigma, like Danny said, around mental health. There's also stigmas attached to a lot of religions that suicide is wrong. But in my mind, and from all the readings I've done, suicide is a mental health illness, and your brain is not healthy. It's a health issue. It's not a character flaw. It's not a sign of weakness or cowardness or anything like that. It's something wrong with our brains.
And it's not something wrong with you. So if you're still carrying that guilt, we want to encourage you to start working on letting it go. It's not healthy for you in your life as well.
Right. You need to work on letting that go because you have no control over the actions of another person.
Yeah, and you have lost your son to suicide. You lost your husband
Correct.
7 months later to suicide.
Correct.
It really affected you, and you found yourself going through a lot of these same things, these myths. You find yourself, I just need to stay busy. All these things, and what I love is you found this grief recovery method, and
Yes.
you had the ability to kind of work through that. And I love that you're here to share it with other people. That's a big deal.
Yeah, I definitely did follow the myths. I kept busy. I was strong for everyone. Literally, the busy part was what I did to be able to get through my grief, but I actually didn't confront my grief until I stopped doing the busy part and you worked this program and found so much relief and comfort and not being stuck in that grief.
That's not a good feeling.
And doing all the myths.
Yeah, that's not a good feeling.
No, it is not.
Let's hop on to the next one. So one of the next one is, why didn't somebody do something? So in this scenario, talk about this scenario where this would be happening. Why didn't somebody do something?
Well, the people, have to find a reason why. And they, my husband, after my son died, he went to every single one of my son's friends and dug and dug and dug for, why didn't you see something? Why didn't you see something? Why didn't I see something? You don't know really what someone is doing or thinking unless you get all the pieces together and then you can see it. But usually by that point, it's too late. So not why didn't, the school do something? Why didn't the police do something? They don't usually have all of the information, all of the clues, all of the signs that they need to step in and help this person.
And this is one of those things that really line up with suicide loss being different than other losses. You may be at home trying to get to the bottom of answers, spending countless nights not sleeping, thinking, why didn't somebody do something? Somebody had to have saw something. Somebody had to have known something. Why didn't they say something? Why didn't they bring it up? Why didn't they tell me I would have done something? Maybe you're dealing with the guilt on your own of why didn't I do something? Why didn't I do more? And that's also a damaging space to be in because, again, you're not going to get to the bottom of that. You're not going to figure that out. It's past.
Right. Then guilt is really a very strong, prevalent emotion when you've suffered a suicide loss. It's the could have, should have, would have. If I had done this, if I had known this, if I could do this over again. But you can't. It's done, it's gone, and now you have to be able to move away from that guilt and know you don't have to carry that.
Yeah. I myself am also a suicide survivor. I had an uncle who completed suicide about 8 years ago, and it was a time in my life where I was busy. I was dating a new girl who I'm married to now. I didn't spend as much time with my uncle as I did the years past, and there was just that moment after where I thought, what if I could have done more? What if I could have been there? Was it because I wasn't there as much as I was? And, ultimately I had to come to terms with I'm never going to know that. And I don't need to accuse myself of anything because I'm making that up, if that makes sense to you.
Yes, that does make sense.
Yeah, and getting over that was a big step for me.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about the next why. So why do I feel like I'm going crazy? Did you deal with this in your life, Laurie?
I did. Suicide is a traumatic loss, a traumatic death. And you don't expect it. You're not prepared for it. No one teaches you or shows you how to deal with someone who has died by suicide. Now, someone who dies by cancer, it's kind of expected that that's going to happen. Suicide is usually with no warning. Sometimes people do, give warning signs, but a lot of times it's just 1 minute it's fine, the next minute your life is completely chaotic and you have no control over anything that's going on at that point, and you feel like you have no control for, at least I did, for a long time after. And the crazy part was I kept playing it over and over in my mind. What could I have done? And why did he do that? And how bad was he feeling to be able to get to that point of dying by suicide? I felt like I was going crazy.
Yeah, and you out there, I love your authenticity, Laurie, and you out there might be going through these questions, and it might be making you feel like, why do I feel like I'm going crazy? Because you're trying to get to the bottom of a lot of these unknowns. And for somebody that's done all the work, Laurie, and put in all the time, did you ever get to the bottom of any of these questions?
No.
And part of the process is ultimately letting go and knowing that you're not going to find these answers. There's not a gleaming light that you missed or a stone you didn't unturn. It's a circumstance that was outside of your control. And as two suicide loss survivors here, we know you got to get through that, and you can't sit there all the time and think, what if? What if?
You can't remain stuck there.
No. All right, let's talk about the last one. And this is what somebody is dealing with at home right now if you're watching this, and that is why can't I get over this? So these are the type of people you have conversations with just about every day, right?
Right. And why can't I get over this? You replay it over and over in your mind. If I had done this, or I missed this, or you replay. If you found your loved one, you replay that over and over and over again, and until you are able to voice those feelings out loud that you're having, it's going to stay stuck inside you until you release it. And once you release those feelings in words out loud, then they're basically gone from your body. You're having to get used to lost hopes, dreams, and expectations that you had for your future with that person. With my son, I wanted more grandchildren. I wanted them to get married, have children, be able to take care of me when I get older. So now you're learning to deal with what you don't have for your future and trying to figure out what my future is going to be. And without taking the right steps through the grief recovery method to help yourself, you're kind of going to be stuck there for a while, maybe forever, until you release those emotions.
Yeah, and if you visit Healing Heart Center, healingheartcenterco.com, you'll see a lot of the testimonials of people that have been through this and have gone through this, and the light they found at the end of that tunnel. Because the reason we did this broadcast today, the reason we talk about the whys, is because we know this is what 90% of suicide survivors are dealing with at home. They're dealing with on their own most of the time. Most people don't deal with it, because one thing we didn't talk about in this broadcast today that we've talked about in the past, and this actually came up in conversation today, is when you talk to somebody that's doesn't know suicide, there's a lot of silver lining. There's a lot of, well, he's in a better place now. He doesn't hurt anymore. And ultimately, from a suicide survivor, when you're dealing with this extreme loss, those help you little to none. Little to none.
And that's part of the grief recovery method. We learn about what people try to say to help you, but it's actually what they're saying is to make them feel like they did something, but then they can step back, because dealing with someone who's lost someone to suicide is hard, because depending on your background, your upbringing, your religion, dealing with suicide might not be anything that you've talked about before, and it can be very uncomfortable for you. That person ends up being the person who's lost someone, ends up comforting the person who's trying to comfort them. And that just is not helpful.
Pretty counterproductive.
Counterproductive, yes.
So if you're on the fence, if you're somebody that's been thinking, I no longer want to feel this way, if you're someone that's been thinking, I no longer want to be driven, or my days don't need to be around, what am I going to think about this? What am I going to think about this? If you're looking to get to the other side of your grief, in a place where someone like Laurie has gotten to the point where she can get over it, then we invite you to check out Healing Heart centercolorado.com. You can see on the website right here. Come check out some stuff. Learn a little more. If you scroll down a little, you are going to hear Laurie's personal story of loss and recovery on what she went through dealing with suicide. And she also had a daughter who overdosed in her family. You can hear her impactful story. And as always, a conversation is the best place to start. So if you're seeing this broadcast, you're likely on Facebook, and sending a message. I mean, you get 3-4 messages a day of people just finally starting to break that communication barrier of opening up to you. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel good, because I love what I'm doing, because I love the results that happen with my clients, because you literally can see the weight lift off their shoulders and that they can embrace life again. It's powerful what happens to you.
Yeah. So if you're interested in more, message this page, go to healingheartcenterco.com to learn more, and schedule a free consultation. Go to a support group. Take the first step in surrounding yourself with people that are like you, that dealt with the same scenarios you're dealing with, and then have answers of how they got over that hump.
Correct. Okay. Yes. So once a month, I offer a suicide survivor support group, and you can check that out on my website.
Awesome. Well, thanks for your time, Laurie. Thank you for adding some value today. And we really hope that you take this time to reach out for the help that we know that you probably need. So have a good rest of your day. If you have any questions, message Laurie directly or visit the website. So we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye-bye.